have you ever felt that something is wrong with your washing machine? Maybe it starts with a strange grinding sound during the spin cycle. Maybe the drum suddenly refuses to turn. Years ago, that kind of problem often meant a simple afternoon project. You could open the back panel, check a belt, replace a small part, tighten something loose, and the machine would go back to work. But today, when something like that happens, the usual solution looks very different. Instead of reaching for a screwdriver, most people reach for their phone. They search the error code, call a technician, or start wondering if it's time to buy a new machine. And that shift didn't happen because people suddenly forgot how to fix things. It happened because the machines themselves changed. Modern washing machines still allow you to do the small, harmless tasks: cleaning a filter, clearing a drain hose, adjusting the feet so the drum doesn't shake the floor. But once the problem moves deeper inside into the electronics, the sealed components, the internal diagnostics, the repair stops being about skill. It becomes about access. In fact, on May 6, 2021, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission released a report called Nixing the Fix, describing how many modern products have become harder to repair because parts, tools, and service information are increasingly restricted. So the real story isn't that DIY repair disappeared. It's that the path to fixing your own machine quietly moved out of reach. And to understand how that happened, we first need to look at what owners can still repair today and what has slowly slipped beyond their hands. The 3 repair zones where DIY still works. So let's make this practical. When people say a washing machine can't be repaired, what they usually mean is something much simpler. The problem has moved outside the owner zone, because today most washer problems fall into 3 different zones. And once you see them, it becomes much easier to understand where DIY repair still exists and where it quietly stops. The first is the owner zone. These are the problems people can still handle the way they always have. Cleaning a clogged filter, clearing the drain hose, rinsing the small inlet screens where water enters the machine, tightening a loose hose or adjusting the leveling feet so the washer stops walking across the floor. These fixes are visible, mechanical, and straightforward. You don't need a special manual, a diagnostic code, or any hidden procedure. If you can see the problem and reach it with basic tools, chances are you're still in the owner zone. The second is what we can call the service zone. This is where repairs become deeper but still technically possible. Replacing a drain pump, swapping a door lock assembly, fixing certain wiring faults, in older machines even replacing a belt or motor coupler. None of these repairs are especially mysterious, but they depend on something most owners never receive: the service manual. Without the correct disassembly steps, wiring diagrams, and part numbers, even a simple repair quickly turns into guesswork. And then there's the third area, the replace zone. This is where the machine crosses a threshold. The failure might involve the control board, a sealed tub bearing, or a system that requires electronic diagnostics before any part can be confirmed. At that point, the repair stops being about swapping a part. It becomes a deeper teardown, a calibration process, or a costly assembly replacement. In other words, the repair crosses a gate. Usually it's one of 4 things: access to the part, access to the right tools, access to service documentation, or access to the machine's diagnostic system. And once one of those gates appears, DIY repair often stops right there. Which brings us to the first gate you can actually see the way modern washing machines are physically built. The sealed machine. Here's the first gate you can actually see. If you remove the back panel of a typical front-loading washer, the whole machine suddenly looks very simple. A belt, a large pulley, and behind it the plastic tub that holds the spinning drum. It doesn't look mysterious at all, but this is exactly where many washing machines quietly cross from the service zone into the replace zone. One of the most common failures in washers happens right here, the drum bearings. When those bearings start wearing out, the machine usually tells you in a very obvious way. During the spin cycle, the washer begins to roar or rumble, almost like a small freight train in the laundry room. That sound means the bearings that support the drum are breaking down. Repair guides warn that if they aren't replaced in time, the loose drum can begin damaging other components around it. So in theory, the repair is straightforward: replace the worn bearings. But this is where the design of the machine suddenly matters. On some washing machines, the outer tub is split into 2 halves and bolted together. That means a technician can remove the drum press out the old bearings, install new ones, and reassemble the machine. It's a long job, but the path exists. On other machines, the tub is sealed or welded closed. In those designs, the bearings are buried inside a structure that isn't meant to come apart. Instead of replacing a small mechanical part, the repair often becomes a full tub assembly replacement, turning a relatively cheap failure into a major repair decision. Real repair data reflects this problem. Large studies of appliance service records have found that failures involving bearings, drums, and tubs are among the least likely repairs to actually be completed compared with simpler problems like doors or small components. In other words, the repair doesn't fail because the part is rare. It fails because the machine was built in a way that makes reaching it extremely difficult. And even when the structure does allow the repair, you run into the next gate almost immediately. The map. The missing manual. Imagine your washer suddenly refuses to spin. The drum turns slowly, then stops. No dramatic noise this time, just a stubborn machine and a blinking light. So you do the normal thing. You grab the model number and search for the manual. You find it quickly. The user guide looks polished and helpful. It explains how to load laundry, which cycle to choose, how to clean the filter, and how to wipe the rubber door seal. But when the problem moves beyond those basics, the instructions become very short. Check the hose, restart the machine, contact service. That's when you realize something important. This isn't the real map. A user manual teaches you how to operate a washer. The document technicians rely on is something completely different. A service manual includes wiring diagrams, diagnostic flowcharts, disassembly instructions, test points for electrical components, and exact part numbers for each version of the machine. Without that information, even a simple repair becomes guesswork. And the shortage of those documents isn't just a homeowner problem. On January 31, 2023, a report from USPIRG found that 89.1% of professional appliance repair technicians struggle to access the service manuals they need, while 93.5% report difficulty finding wiring schematics. In other words, even the people whose job is to fix these machines are often hunting for the same information you are. Another survey from the same organization found that 86% of appliance manufacturers do not publicly provide full repair instructions or service manuals for their products. So when a repair suddenly feels confusing or uncertain, it isn't always because the repair itself is difficult. It's because the instructions that make the repair predictable are missing. Sometimes technicians get lucky. A folded diagnostic sheet may be hidden behind the lower front panel of the machine, a small document meant for service crews that lists error codes and test procedures. But without that map, repairs quickly turn into trial and error swapping parts, making repeat visits, or eventually deciding the machine isn't worth the trouble. And even when you do manage to find the right document, modern washers have added another layer to the puzzle. They speak their own language. The washer's language. When a modern washing machine runs into trouble, it usually doesn't explain the problem in plain words. Instead, you get something small and cryptic. A blinking symbol, a pair of letters, maybe a short code on the display. To most owners, that code looks like a diagnosis. But in reality, it's only the beginning of one. Manufacturers typically publish a simplified list of these codes in their support pages. A door error, a drainage problem, a balance warning. The instructions that follow are usually straightforward. Check the hose, redistribute the laundry, restart the machine. If the issue continues, contact service. That's the owner's translation layer, a surface-level interpretation of what the machine is detecting. But inside the washer, there's a deeper system at work. Technicians interact with the machine through something called diagnostic mode. On many models, a specific sequence of buttons unlocks a hidden testing environment where the washer can run individual components, display stored fault history, and confirm whether sensors are working correctly. Service documents describe these modes in detail. A Whirlpool tech sheet, for example, labels these procedures clearly for service technicians' use only. Once inside that environment, the error codes start to look different. Instead of a single message, faults are organized in layers. One part of the code points to the general system, motor, water control, electronics. Another points to the suspected component within that system. In other words, the code doesn't name the broken part. It simply narrows the search. And sometimes the washer is keeping a memory of these problems as well. Certain machines can store multiple fault codes from past cycles. Service instructions even include procedures for clearing that history, which means a careless reset can erase the very clues that explain what happened. Even when nothing is technically broken, software can still play a role. Some washers require a calibration routine after installation, or when the machine has been moved, allowing internal sensors to relearn how weight and balance behave during a spin cycle. Without that step, the washer may behave as if something is wrong even when the hardware is perfectly fine. In some cases, your phone becomes the interpreter. Brands like LG offer features such as Smart Diagnosis, where the washer communicates with a mobile app through sound signals or wireless connection to identify potential faults. Helpful, yes, but it also reveals something subtle about how modern machines are designed. The washer is no longer just a collection of mechanical parts. It's a system that constantly observes itself, measuring weight balance, water levels, motor load, and electrical signals. When something behaves outside the expected pattern, the machine reports it in its own shorthand language. Which means fixing the machine isn't only about replacing a part anymore. It's about understanding the conversation happening inside it. The repair bill stack. By this point, the washer's problem might finally make sense. You've translated the error code. You have a rough idea which part might be responsible. The machine is no longer a mystery. But repair rarely begins with a screwdriver. It usually begins with a service visit fee. In many places, the first step is paying simply to have a technician come and diagnose the machine. Consumer guidance from which explains that this call-out charge, often covering the first hour of work, typically lands somewhere around $55 to $190 depending on the service company and travel distance. Only after that first visit does the real repair conversation begin. And that's when the bills start stacking. A door seal replacement, for example, might cost roughly $120 to $250 once labor and parts are included. Replacing a drain pump can fall in a similar range, but once the failure moves into electronics, the numbers climb much faster. A control board replacement can easily reach $250 to $500 depending on the model and how available the part is. And then there are repairs that many technicians simply decline. Jobs involving the drum or internal tub may technically be possible, but the labor required to reach those parts often pushes the repair cost so high that replacing the machine becomes the practical recommendation. This is where the economics quietly shift. Consumer research suggests a typical washing machine might physically last around 10 to 11 years. But the moment when repair begins to feel less worthwhile often arrives earlier, sometimes around 7 or 8 years, especially if a single repair approaches $300 or more. At the same time, Consumer Reports has found that the median out-of-pocket repair cost for washers is about $155, meaning many fixes are still relatively small. The difficulty is that you rarely know which side of that line your machine will fall on. Your repair might be the $155 fix, or it might be the $400 repair hiding behind a simple symptom. And once repair becomes a chain of charges, diagnosis, labor, parts, and time, many owners begin to ask a very different question. Not can this machine be fixed, but is it still worth fixing? The authorized path. By now, the machine's problem might actually be clear. The noise made sense, the error code was translated. The likely part has been identified and the repair cost is roughly understood. At that point, most people assume the hardest part is over. But there's still one quiet question left in the process. Who is supposed to fix the machine? For many owners, the answer feels obvious: call the brand's official service line. The reasoning is simple. If the manufacturer built the washer, their technicians must know it best. Part of that instinct comes from warranties. Many people believe that using an independent repair shop or installing unofficial parts could cancel their warranty coverage. In reality, consumer protection laws in places like the United States generally prevent companies from voiding a warranty simply because a product was repaired outside the manufacturer's own network. But the perception remains powerful, and perception shapes behavior. Manufacturers often maintain authorized repair networks, giving certified technicians direct access to official service documentation, diagnostic procedures, calibration tools, and genuine replacement parts. Independent repair shops can often obtain many of these resources as well, but not always as quickly or as easily. The result is a kind of gravitational pull in the repair market. When a washer fails, the easiest and most predictable path often leads back toward the manufacturer's own service system. That system has clear advantages. Authorized technicians typically work with the correct components and follow procedures approved by the company that designed the machine. Repairs can be standardized, quality controlled, and logged within the brand's support system. But there's also a quiet trade-off. As appliances become more connected, more electronic, and more dependent on software and calibration routines, the repair ecosystem around them tends to narrow. Fewer people have the tools, information, or authorization needed to perform the work confidently. The machine in your laundry room may still belong to you, yet the network that keeps it running is increasingly organized somewhere else. What can you do when your washer breaks? So, at this point, the picture might feel a little discouraging. Machines are sealed, manuals are hard to find, diagnostics speak a language most owners never see. Repair costs can stack up quickly, but none of that means you're powerless. The real goal isn't to become a washing machine technician. The goal is to remove the surprise. Think of it as a small playbook you can follow before problems appear. The first step actually happens before you buy a machine. When you're comparing models, take a minute to check how repairable the washer might be. A quick phone search for the model number plus the words service manual or parts diagram can tell you a lot. If repair information is easy to find, that's usually a good sign. If nothing appears except marketing pages, the repair path may be more restricted. Second, build a small record for the machine on day one. Take a photo of the model and serial numbers. Save the receipt. Download the user manual and any parts diagrams you can find. If the washer ever develops a fault later, having that information ready saves time and confusion. Third, when a problem appears, document it before doing anything else. Record the sound, photograph the error code, write down what cycle the machine was running and what kind of load was inside. That small evidence trail can make a diagnosis far easier later. Fourth, treat repair like a conversation, not a guess. When speaking with a technician, ask clear questions. What does the visit fee include? What part do you suspect first? If that part doesn't solve the issue, what is the next likely cause? These questions reduce the uncertainty that makes repairs expensive. Finally, remember that repair options are broader than many people assume. Consumer protection agencies have repeatedly reminded manufacturers that warranty rules should not unfairly restrict independent repair. The machine in your laundry room may be complex, but the strategy for dealing with it can stay simple. Document the machine, understand the signals, ask clear questions. Because the moment you remove surprise from the process, the washer stops feeling like a mystery and starts feeling like a machine again. If there's one thing this story shows, it's that fixing a washing machine today isn't just about tools anymore. It's about design information software and the repair system built around the machine. But that doesn't mean owners have no control. A little preparation, documenting your machine, understanding its signals, and asking the right questions can make a huge difference when something goes wrong. If this video helped you see the system more clearly, consider subscribing for more breakdowns like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.